So I'm calling to order the Select Board meeting for November 16th, 2020. We do still have a couple of members joining us. We do have a quorum because we're doing this remote, and we will be doing electronic meetings from now until the end of whatever period the governor says it's safe not to. We want to set an example for the community. We also want people who would join us at meetings and so forth to be safe. We want to keep employees safe. So that's what we'll be doing for the time being. We did go back live for a while, although distanced and masked. I do like the interaction that's more direct, but that's not a possibility at this point. So we're going to start. And typically, because we're now meeting electronically, unless we have one individual, for example, we want to move forward in the agenda, I'm going to tend to, unless the board thinks otherwise at any time, of course, I'm going to tend to try to stick to the agenda because people can join us at, they can turn us on and off a little easier. It's not like they have to come down to town hall and sit through a long meeting. So we'll go ahead and start with the minutes, the Select Board meeting of October 19, 2020. The minutes were emailed to you today, I believe. I did read them. Do I have a motion in regard to those minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes of Monday, October 19th, 2020, as submitted.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of October 19, 2020. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? I have to call a roll. I just remembered that I have to do that for electronic meetings. So, Mr. Price.
Yes.
Ms. Salmons.
Yes.
Ms. Woodson. Ms. Woodson,
Yes.
thank you. Ralph.
Yes.
Mr. Eno. And you can hear me, Ralph, right?
Yes, I can.
Oh, great. Okay, good. And I vote yes as well. So we'll move on to warrants 17 through 20. They're in two batches. They're 17 and 18 and 19 and 20. Dennis, I believe these were yours. Is that correct? You'll need to turn your microphone on.
You're going to have to give me a hot second while I call everything up. It just closed, and you're just going to have to bear with me. I appreciate it.
Bruce, I did the second set and Dennis did the first.
Yep.
Okay, why don't we proceed with 19 and 20 while Dennis is bringing up 18 and 19. Please go ahead,
Okay.
Catherine. Thank
That would
you.
be good. So this was warrant 19 and 20. The payroll was $17,863.26. Don't know what my screen is doing here. The accounts payable was $382,075.05 for a total of $399,938.31. This did include a school payment, which is why we had this expense. That was $303,000 essentially. We also made the first installment payment for Cushing Construction for their snowplow contract, or that may be the second one actually. Another significant purchase we made, the money wasn't that big, but it's a really cool payment, was to Central Maine Power for $4,452, which buys us the lights on the power poles owned by Central Maine Power, which was the final step for us to go ahead and start installing our LED light upgrades, which is being done by Affinity LED, which we also had a payment for $1,700 for.
Great.
Let me see if there's anything else significant there. We do have a $5,400 payment to New England Salt Company for getting ready for the roads. We had several payments go out for things that people had voted in at town meeting. Sexual Assault Crisis and Support Center was $910. Kennebec Behavioral Health was $1,000. The Family Violence Project was $1,000, and the Readfield Union Meeting House was $5,000. So those were the things of significant interest, I thought.
What was the Cartographic Associates? Do you know?
That one I don't it was a GIS update for
Okay.
our mapping.
Yeah,
Thank you.
the online GIS software that we're still working to get developed for public use, but is available for staff anyway.
Great. I'll take a motion on those warrants.
I move that we accept warrant 19 and 20 for a total of $399,938.31.
Is there a second, please?
I'll
A
second.
second.
Go ahead,
Stand
Dennis. We'll
second.
give it to you.
Great. It's been seconded by Mr. Price. Are there any questions or discussion regarding the warrants? It's been moved to approve warrants 19 and 20 in the amount of $399,938.31. I'll call the roll. Mr. Price, please.
Yes.
Ms. Sammons, please.
Yes.
Ms. Woodson, please.
Yes.
Mr. Eno, please.
Yes.
Mr. Burgoyne is yes. Okay, that passes. Are you ready with 17 and 18, Dennis?
Sure am. Thank you for your patience.
Absolutely,
All
anytime.
right. Sure. We start out with the payroll, which was $16,648.17. And that is the first part. The second part is quite a load of things that I wanted to point out, some big items, much like Catherine did. The Androscoggin Bank is a payment, I'm pretty sure. Eric, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, that was I believe that one was payment for over someone who double paid taxes.
Yeah. The Cushing construction, you can see, excuse me, Cushing construction was just, that was just some service we had done to the roads. The one that Eric LaCroix, was he a consultant?
I'd have to think about that one.
Oh, it's $22.95. It just says administration for Eric LaCroix.
Yeah, let me see
The
if I can find
Callahan
that.
construction, that is for the,
That was trails, Dennis.
what's that?
$22.95 is for the trails.
Oh,
Yes, that's
that was
right.
the bench, Ken Clark's bench, I believe.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. I didn't know. It said Eric LaCroix, but I didn't know if that was.
And that bench is a pass-through, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly right. The Callahan construction, that was the Torrey Dam.
Mhm.
SJ Wood is from the fire station and the library project. And the rest of the stuff is pretty normal things, nothing that was crazy. But that's it. And that is for a total of $196,767.47. So therefore, the total warrant amount for 17 and 18 is $213,415.64.
I'll move that we accept that.
Second?
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. I'm just going to let the tape, decide who's the second. I don't have to do that. We'll get down to the microseconds on this. It's been moved and seconded to approve the treasurer's warrants 17 and 18 in the amount of $213,415.64. Are there any questions or remarks in regards or discussion in regards to that motion? Seeing none, Mr. Price,
Yes.
Ms. Sammons,
Yes.
Ms. Woodson,
Yes.
Mr. Eno,
Yes.
Mr. Burgoyne is yes. So thank you. Do we have people joining us tonight for the appointments, Eric, or not? Do we know?
I don't believe we have many. I think most had spoken to the board at the session that we had, and also the ones coming from the sending committees. They, I believe, had I won't call it a pass, but that the sending committees were,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, I'll get into that when we get to that point in the agenda. we could, okay, let's go ahead with Select Board Communications.
I'd like to say something if I could.
Yes, please, Chris.
I want to thank everyone who participated in the trunk and treat. It was a huge success. And I want to thank Anna and Ben. They bought vehicles from the town and they were there that evening. We had 16 trunks and I don't know, Eric, 400 kids.
I think Melissa Small did the math on it. Yeah, she kept the track, and it was some crazy number, like 300, 400 kids and a couple hundred adults.
Yeah, it was just a never-ending line of kids and parents, and they all were very good about being COVID safe, and it was a great evening.
Good. Anybody else?
Yes. I'd like to point out that Eric spent quite a bit of time over the last couple weeks helping me, but doing the primary lifting on applying for a grant for the solid waste for our transfer station for composting. And I know that was extra difficult this week because of some changes in staffing and having to go through all the new COVID restrictions again. So I'd just like to put a shout out for the hard work on that.
Thank you.
You're here.
Anybody else? I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the entire town staff and all the people who participated in our election in terms of not only just the people who worked the election, but a very nice turnout from the community. I want to particularly thank Kents Hill School for providing us a polling place that had adequate parking, was all on one floor, was very large for social distancing needs and so forth. That was a great citizenship partnership offered to us by Kents Hill School, and I'm really very grateful to them. And thank you everybody who participated either by voting in advance. I have no idea what the final turnout was for Readfield. I'm sure we could get that number, but I believe it was probably around 80%. It was very high. The other thing I wanted to mention is I'm behind on getting out the town manager evaluation material. It will be out. I've spoken to Eric about it. My intent is to get it done between the two holidays, between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So we'll be able to have the meetings we need in executive session via Zoom, and we'll be able to complete that process and get good input from people. So I apologize. I'm personally behind on that. Anybody else? Thanks. We'll move on to, let me just ask Brian, are you monitoring us or do you want to be recognized a little earlier in the meeting? Because I can do either.
It's entirely up to you, whatever works for you.
Well, you're a one-off, so we're not waiting for other people to come and speak with you. So I'm more than happy to move you up. I think what I would do is go ahead and let Eric do his staff reports because I kind of cut him off there. He does it right after the select board reports. And I'll recognize a couple of minutes that were turned in by committees, see if there's any public members to communicate, and then go right to you, Brian. That'll probably be around 10 minutes. Go ahead, Eric.
Maybe less. So Bruce, I'll start by saying I think it's great that you're doing that between Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's when people are feeling most generous. So I don't object to having my review during that period of time. So no worries there at all. I appreciate having that done in any event. So I'll give a quick report. Just start by saying that the election really has been a resounding success. We've had more positive feedback for this than any election that I've ever been a part of. The staff really did come together. The community came together. We had very few, issues of people not wanting to participate in the program that was put out for public health and safety. And overall, just a phenomenal, effort by all of the poll workers and everybody. So I also just want to extend my thanks for that. Because it was just something that, it's a historic election, historic turnout in Readfield, and it showed. So everybody rose to the occasion and did a fantastic job. And that really has been a lot of our activity over the past month. We've had a few other things come together and move ahead. The fire station we'll be talking about tonight. That's finally settling down a little bit, and the project for the dam, the Torsi Pond Dam, was wrapped up in October. So we've made some good progress on a few key areas, but really the focus has been on the election and also on COVID as of late. And so that really has taken a lot of focus and attention. But again, the staff has been very good about dealing with adversity and the changes that have been required in order to keep our office and our public safe as we navigate all this stuff. So I do want to talk a little bit about personnel and staff because I have a couple of things to go over. First, Teresa Shaw has been with the town of Readfield for 20 years, and we've been holding off for the right time to do a recognition and give her a rocking chair that was, picked up as a point of recognition for her service. But there just has been no good time over the past 3 months, and now we're heading off to the 2021 without any reprieve in sight. So I thought it was appropriate to just recognize her for 20 years of service and good, solid service at that. She is an absolute standby, and she has been out of the office for the last couple of weeks here. She made it through the election and helped us all get through that time, and then had to take care of some other business. But she's been phenomenal and really helped me in my job. And I know that she's really the backbone of this town in the work that she does. And every committee sees it if they work with the town. She's the finance officer and so much more. So I just wanted to thank her for that.
Congratulations to her, Eric.
I'll pass it along from the board, absolutely.
Here, yeah.
The other announcement I have is far less positive. We do have an informal resignation from our code enforcement officer as of Friday. He has taken a job in the town of China, which is, by my understanding, a little bit better paying and a little bit closer to home. And so he made the decision to give us his notice, and we have about 2 weeks left with him. In the interim, I have spoken with one of our former code officers who you all know, Cliff Buck, and he will be willing to step in for the town of Readfield only. And unfortunately, he can't do both Readfield and Wayne, which is the relationship that we had built. He'll be able to step in for us and give us 4 to 6 weeks to get a new candidate interviewed and in. I don't believe we'll have nearly as much trouble as we've had in the past. Again, we put together a very good position with the town of Wayne, 4 days a week, fairly reasonable rate of pay, and full-time benefits for only 32 hours of work. So I think it should be attractive, and we've gotten through all the hard stuff with that. We've ironed out all the details of the offer letters and the contract and all that, and we're ready to go and get this one filled quickly. So those are the 2 items I had for personnel, and as I said, really I'm just looking forward in the month of December and the new year to getting back to some other projects and focusing on something besides the election and COVID. So if
It's called the budget, Eric.
Yeah.
I almost forgot about that. Yeah, but that's getting started too. We've got a budget committee meeting happening quite likely next week, or at the very latest in December. So anyway, that's my report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Eric,
I don't
go
have a
ahead,
question,
Catherine.
but I have a comment that goes to Bruce and Eric. I was working at the poll and I just looked at the results. I believe our number was 1,808 voters, and we registered over 100 voters on the day of elections. There were others that were registered during the election process, either before they voted absentee or when they voted in person at the town office ahead of time. And I think that was a record setting for Readfield.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah.
I want to just very quickly and personally and do this on behalf of the board, congratulate Teresa. I mean, without a doubt, everything that has been said thus far is absolutely true. I wish we were doing this in a public presentation of the rocking chair, but let her rock, okay, Eric? Give her the chair. I don't know if you have yet or not, but let her rock.
Yeah,
And we will at a town function at some point do a greater public recognition, which we have a lot waiting for us there. Okay, great. We'll move on to boards, committees, commissions, and departments. That would be the library board submitted their minutes for October 7, 2020. Thank you to them. The Trails Committee submitted their minutes from July 28th, 2020, and thank you to them. I did have one other question for you, Eric, from your report, if I may. Regarding the Torrey Dam, will we have any kind of just a very informal wrap-up meeting with the Dam Association, maybe just a call or something to see if there were any glitches or any recommendations approaching a project that's similar in size, and if they were satisfied? I think we were satisfied with the work we had done, and I've been down there and seen the dam itself. Of course, I don't know all the mechanics of it and everything, but it looks brand spanking new pretty much, and looks like a good job was done. But some sort of like exit discussion, I think.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. I've been working very closely with their representative, Keith Cowling, and he's been phenomenal. He was really almost a clerk of the works down there, in large part because the most complicated part of that project was the dam, and that's the responsibility of the Lake Association. But pleasure to work with, and I think that it's a good idea to schedule like a Zoom meeting or something and invite some of the members of that board and perhaps our the select board if anybody wants to debrief. But at the very least, I think Keith and I will have we'll get that going, and I'm sure we'll get some good information out of it.
Great. We'll move on to public communications. Are there any members of the public with us tonight that want to speak? I see none, at least by phone. There's one person by phone, but I don't see a hand raised. So I'll go on. If for some reason public members join us later, I'll figure out a way to recognize them. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Great. Now we'll move on to, we're going to skip ahead, and we're going to skip to item 2126, discussing the ongoing regional broadband project, and that is under old business. It's your second item. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Bruce.
Who is going to lead this discussion?
I can give an introduction, but I think
Why don't you do that?
You and Brian ought to be or you and Catherine and Brian ought to be the primary
Sure.
folks here. If I can find my papers.
Basically, we're gonna get an update on the work that we're looking to have done for the town, and Brian did provide us some background information on that.
Yes, I can start with the first thing while Eric's finding his papers. We put an internet survey out. Eric did that. That was the same survey made by the regional committee and sent to each town with each town's own letterhead on it. So they were trying to compile like questions and answers so that we can have some comparisons made. So we're looking to get as many people as possible to fill that in. And now I'll turn it over to Eric, who looks like he's up with us.
Finally got to it. The survey has been a good tool, and I think that we can expand and utilize it in other areas. We already have over 80 responses, and the differences between Readfield and some of the other communities are striking. From what I've been able to tell from the data that's been provided by the platform, Readfield really has, as we have expected, more of a focus on speed and reliability. I mean, reliability is important elsewhere, but the idea of speed being a very important factor hasn't shown up in other towns the way it has in Readfield. So I was curious to see that. And as the results roll in, I think that what we'll do is probably wait until we get about 100 responses, which shouldn't take more than another week or two. And that'll give us about 10% of our households having responded, which is good for a report like that. We'll obviously leave the survey up and, as I said, look at other outreach methods to get input. But in the age of COVID, in the age of remote meetings, it's been a good tool. I think that we're going to have to continue to expand on tools like it to get the real feedback that we're looking for. We have some emails that have been collected. Almost, I'd say, 60% of the people that responded to the survey gave us email addresses so we can continue to engage them on this important issue. And that's another important function of this survey, is to help get emails, in addition to what we have on our regular listserv. So the survey, as I said, has been working quite well. It's nice that it's the same set of questions for all of our towns, because we can do some comparisons and find out, what's important in what areas of the WKL-CBA. But any questions on the survey, suggestions, thoughts on outreach generally?
I'd like to see us try and get it more widely dispersed, maybe putting signs up at the library or maybe on the library website.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if we can somehow send a message out through the schools, maybe. This affects a lot of kids and parents who are trying to do online learning, remote learning. So I think it would be useful that Readfield parents know that there's a survey available that they could participate in.
Yeah, I did reach out to the superintendent, but I haven't heard back, so I'll follow up with him this week as well on that. And I thought that would be a good channel as well, because my kids in second and fourth grade have tablets and they're doing online stuff, and it's crazy. But every student in the school district that can push a button has a device now, and it's really important. So
I just want to reiterate that I very much agree with Catherine. It's nice to have 100 or 10% of our households, but I really would like to see that up around 40% or something like that. I think it would be a better representation of need, and it would also help indicate, I think, usage, which we'll be talking about. So that would help us as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I did make a note of the 40% target as well. I think that's it's good to have a goal, and we'll strive to get there. The education and public information piece of this is one of the pieces we've been working on for the longest, and it is helping to prepare us for the next step, which is to take some tangible action steps towards rolling out a municipal fiber to the home network, which definitely is the direction we're heading in. In order to do that, we need specialized services for consulting, design and engineering, construction and management of a system like that. And one of the first pieces that I mentioned, and one of the most important, is that consulting component to get the skills necessary to find out who we need to work with, how best to structure our requests for proposals as we pursue this work. And so we had an initial meeting, myself, Catherine, and Bruce, with Brian Lippold, who has worked with the WKL-CBA and is their primary resource to discuss some of the options that we had for moving forward. And we did request a quote from him for some of those services, and he generously provided a timeline that I think is very helpful for us in understanding how to proceed. We followed up that with a request for more information and more specific numbers for the work that needs to be done. And within probably a couple weeks of that meeting, we had somebody from a competing entity, Tilson, who also provides network design, engineering, and consulting services. They might even do construction, I don't recall, but reach out to the town and say, we heard through the grapevine that you guys are looking for these services. So I did request from them similar information. I said, we'd like to know what you think it's going to cost for us to do this project from an administrative perspective, that being the consulting and management piece, and also for them to give us just an hourly rate to get that stuff underway. And so they did provide us with some of that information in the form of an email. So what I've provided in the select board packet is the email from Tilson, the Gantt chart, and proposal from Casco Bay Advisors, being Brian, to give us an idea of what scope we would be looking at. And if the board would like to consider moving ahead with some of these aspects, we have, I think, a very good portion of the available market in the state of Maine represented. There are not many people that provide these services. And so I believe that this quote process that we've undertaken is a good place to start. Obviously, as we get further along, the RFP process will take over for things like construction and management of the actual network. But in the initial phases, I believe that the quote process leads us to a good place where we have some actually similar numbers. But I guess I'll leave it to the board and to Brian to discuss the specifics of his proposal, as Tilson basically gave us two numbers to work with that are included in the email. One was their hourly rate, the other was their estimate of the total project cost. So I guess I'll leave that because I can't say much else.
Right. It's not a side-by-side comparison, and we'll need to discuss what we want in terms of, information to do that. Catherine, I'm going to recognize you, please.
Thank you. So Brian, I'm going to ask you this question. So you'll know it's coming to you. When we had our phone call, we discussed that the Gantt chart that you gave us is for 18 months, but you said that there could be some considerable condensing by combining some services at the same time, because they're not all done directly by you, but by people that work with and for you. And that I believe what I heard was that this could be condensed down to something possibly in the 12-month range rather than the 18-month range, if that was how the town decided to proceed. So I'm just wondering if you would share that aspect of this with people. And then at some point in this discussion, I just have a comment about how this cost would kind of work for the town. I'm done.
All right. Well, is it appropriate that I can share my screen, Eric? Or
yeah, I can make that happen. Give me 1 second here if I can get my mouse on the right screen.
Yeah, and if you are actually referring to the memo you sent us, we all have that.
was it the second version? I noticed what was in your board packet was the initial.
Then it's not the second version.
No.
So please go ahead and share.
You should be all set, but let me know if you're
All
not. Okay, it's working.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
very good. So I took what I had provided previously and expanded on it a little bit. And I don't know if you can see my cursor or not.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What I tried to do was break down some of the tasks a little bit more granular than what was on the original, but also to divide this into the tasks that will allow you to, one, solidify what your costs will be before you needed to raise money to fund the construction and the oversight of the construction. So these red lines sort of separate things. And Catherine, to your point, how do we compress this schedule? It really comes down to how quickly you can get your funding in line and make your decision that you want to move forward. So there are some items that are linear in nature. And let me start first. I don't recommend that you do anything until we put together a financial pro forma that will look at the operating expenses of the network, including the debt service, and to finalize what your goals will be in terms of the service pricing, your assumptions around the market share or the take rate that would accrue through this project. So that's the first thing I would do. And all of these tasks, you can stop the project at any time. You don't have to commit to doing everything, but rather start with the financial pro forma. If that's something then that you want to move forward with, determine your level of taxpayer support and what your funding model will be, what your business model will look like in the operating entity. And then you move into actually engineering the network. And when I refer to engineering the network, I'm talking about putting together all of the detail and the construction drawings that would be used to go out to bid for construction. And that's your biggest expense in this first phase. Beyond that, then you would go into an RFP process for the construction and also for the operator that you would hire to operate the network. And that's a process that is difficult to really compress time-wise. But while you're doing that, you could go through the process of determining where your central office would be, your PUC certification, negotiating pole attachment agreements, and then also submitting your pole attachment information to the pole owners to determine exactly what the construction costs would be to make the poles ready to deploy a network. And that takes about 90 days. And then you get firm quotes back from the pole owners as to what that cost would be. So in this phase, you would nail down what is the cost of construction, what would the cost be for the network operator, and what would the cost be for the pole make ready. Then you would have a firm budget to take to the voters or however you're going to fund this. And that phase of the construction could be pulled in tighter. After you get the operating pro forma developed and everyone's on the same page, then some of these items can be compressed. I don't know that you would actually be able to get it down to 12 months, but you would be able to get it to somewhere between 12 and 18 months, depending upon the amount of make ready. And on this line item, the utility pole make ready project management, once you understand what the cost will be for make ready and you cut the checks for the pole owners and you submit those, then they have about 6 months to complete their make ready. That could compress. Maybe there's not going to be as much make ready required as we anticipate. It shouldn't go any longer. And then depending upon on the construction side, how many crews the contractor puts onto the project dictates how quickly they can construct. The other unknown in here is the availability of materials. And prior to COVID, the construction contractors were pleading for additional help. They were that busy. And this, the materials in terms of the fiber optic cable and the electronics, this type of activity is taking place nationwide or worldwide for that matter. So there's a lot of pent-up demand, and that's not something that we can forecast as to how quickly the contractors could get the materials. So this is looking at a typical timeline. There's all kinds of things we can do to try to compress it, but to be realistic, I think you really are looking at an 18-month time frame from the beginning of putting together the financial pro forma until you're having all your subscribers turned up. And I'll also say this project schedule, this is still incredibly high level. A true project schedule for all of the tasks and all of the work would be multiple pages. There's a lot of detail here that I'm not showing on the screen. So this red line item, I gave a low and a high estimate. The way that I like to work is on a time and expense basis. If I have to put together a firm price, then the price ends up being higher because I've got to cover any contingency. But it would be somewhere between 125 and 190,000 to get ready to pull the trigger to start construction. And down in the lower part here, you see 3 line items that are in a light blue. The upper area would solidify these numbers. So we would get rid of the low and high, and you'd have actual cost for the entire project at that point. So I'll stop there, and hopefully that was a long answer to your very brief question, but I wanted to provide that background.
I think that was all great information. Thank you.
Yeah, Brian, do email that to Eric, and he'll distribute it to the rest of the board members. Are there any questions for Brian at this point on what he's presented? So then we can go ahead and talk a little bit more about timing concerns and make a decision if we want to talk about that and for how long tonight versus maybe going to a workshop to do this. Questions for Brian first. Brian?
Eric, could you make it, or Bruce, could you ask for people to mute themselves if they're not speaking? We keep hearing like a food processor or something run.
It's not me, but you may hear my fan occasionally.
Ah, maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I typically don't mute because I'm always blabbing. I apologize.
That's okay.
Okay.
I had that on mute to tell you I'm laughing, so.
I think it would be good for us to discuss this in a workshop, but I think it needs to be between now and our next meeting and on the earlier side than the later side. I think it would be wise for us to maybe take the first 2 or 3 lines and move forward with those right away, and then see how we feel about, I mean, until we get the pro forma, we don't have any real idea how this is going to work. And that seems to have been what Brian has suggested all along. And Eric, I think, has been in agreement with that. It all kind of needs to gel together at the same time so that we can put something out in this year's town meeting. And so that's what we're really trying to do here, is to decide if we want to move forward with this. If we don't go to this year's town meeting, then this becomes a 30-month project, which doesn't really meet the needs of the public as well. So.
Yeah, we're kind of a victim of timing in all of this to some extent in terms of getting public input. But I certainly would like to see the financial operating pro forma on a fairly rapid basis. So why don't we plan on going to workshop mode? Do we want to set a date for that right now? Or would you like to do it through a poll that Eric can just put out tomorrow morning?
I'm
Let's
fine
do-
with
let-
doing it now.
Okay. I would prefer to do the poll because I'm going to be suggesting another workshop as well. And we need to get dates on both of those.
Okay.
So unless other members of the board want to do that right now, we'll do that. We'll get that done in 24 hours. Everybody just answers the poll so we know where we are.
Is there any value in going ahead with either contingency money or money from grant writing lines to having the performance start now? Because that's something that we could actually even use when we're in our workshop that would help to guide us.
What would be the time, Brian, from your point of view of doing that?
For me, that would be a December activity.
Throughout December or by the end of December kind of thing?
Yes, exactly. So I'd get started on it beginning of December, and I think that there would be some iteration with you and your committee that we would want to walk through this and do some what-if scenarios and so forth.
And we're just talking about the very first line.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, December.
Okay. That probably, if we want to have this for the workshop, because it's kind of the basis of a lot of the discussion, that puts us at the end of December or early January to actually do the workshop.
Well, let me rephrase it.
Okay.
After Thanksgiving and before mid-December, we can have the pro forma solidified.
Gee, did I embarrass you into that? Probably not.
Well,
So I'm very familiar with Brian's work thus far, and I would be very comfortable with him doing the pro forma, and I think it's probably the most rapid way to get it delivered. And I am also comfortable with doing it on the hourly basis because I think that's just the simplest approach on this. So I would be happy tonight to go ahead and authorize that to begin. And then we can then go ahead and figure out what we want to do with the workshop. I think there are some other greater details to talk about. For example, I think we really need to do quite a bit of education with the town as to what a bond of this size means. It is not a bond that the town pays back. Yes, we're the backer of that bond, but it's a bond that the subscribers pay back. And we want to make that clear as to how that works, because that's the greatest selling point, if you will, I think, in terms of people understanding what this is. Because we did have somebody kind of choke when we mentioned at a past meeting this bond, because it would be the largest bond ever floated, we've ever floated. So it's a different beast, a different kind of approach.
so I did put together a slide that you'll receive that talks about the financial pro forma. And there are 3 areas where we would run different sensitivities. One is around the pricing of the service. Another is around the market share or the take rate of the service. And the third is around the debt service. So how could you, those are 3 levers in the financial pro forma that you can use to, and you would want to have that information before you start educating your constituency on what does that mean from a bond perspective. So,
I'm happy to go ahead and make a motion to do this. I'm not sure exactly how to phrase it, so if it's not right, just scrap it. But
Just authorize Eric to engage Brian to do that first piece is what I think he would do.
So I'll make a motion to authorize the town manager to employ Casco Bay Advisors to develop a 5-year financial operating pro forma for fiber to the home network for Readfield by the middle of December.
I
Second.
will second that for purposes of discussion, and I have a question.
Please.
I want to make sure that what we're talking about here is the town undertaking this enterprise on its own. So we will essentially be going down a road that puts us in competition with the present cable providers. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And then part of that financial pro forma will probably be very important in terms of how we handle debt service. We're going to need to have a pretty good handle, I would think, on what our subscriber base is going to be before we jump in.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's actually going to kind of come determining the level of taxpayer support. So Brian will essentially give us, for lack of a better term, I think you've used this already, the levers, and we'll have to make some assessments based on those with real input and also estimates.
Because that vote is going to have to also tell us what we think that subscriber base will be at the outset so that we can make some good financial decisions in terms of tax load and hopefully see it diminish over the out years of the bond as perhaps we're more successful in growing our client base.
Yes. And
Well, and you would hope that the initial take rate would be very high because we can, we're not going to get into a lot of technical discussion tonight, but you certainly can offer upfront free hookup to the home, for example, and then begin charging for it if you don't commit to the initial project. And I think you had constructed a couple that way, Brian. And so there's a big advantage for people there too.
Certainly, you'll want to build in incentives for early sign-up.
right. And Readfield has a very high rate already of households who have internet service. So it's not a matter of us figuring out if people want internet. It's figuring out if they want a more reliable, more better speed and better cost internet. So we know that there's a market out there, and we know it's a very large percentage of our households. We just have to determine how many people would want to switch to having this kind of service. And that's where the survey and other meetings will have to help us do that.
Well, we do have a motion on the floor. Was that motion seconded?
I
Yes.
believe it
Oh,
was.
Ralph, you did for the purpose of discussion. Did we have all discussion on that motion? Okay, I'll call the roll then. Price,
Yes.
Ms. Sammons,
Yes.
Ms. Woodson,
Yes.
Mr. Eno.
Yes.
Mr. Burgoyne is a yes as well. And I want to close out the discussion with one remark, okay? And that is when we talk about kind of the comparison of cable and fiber to the home, our goal here is lightning fast. It is an expansion of the kind of service that is visionary in scope for hopefully approximately the same price or a very competitive price that may even be less than what we're getting bound up with cable service. So that's really my goal in all of this, that will allow many people who are professionals and service people who are working at home now and people who are distance learning is probably going to continue, not just because of COVID, but on a college basis or whatever, for a variety of reasons. And, you know, I've talked a lot about medical use, and we've actually had at least one person from the medical profession contact us and talk a little bit about this as well. So we're really aiming for night and day here. I want to make that clear. This is not just a small scale better improvement.
Yeah, better isn't quite the right adjective. We should work on language, but I think you're absolutely right.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you, Brian. I think we're all set on this subject, and we'll get out some timing on the workshop. We may end up having a couple workshops in this, probably more than likely. Brian, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but you don't really need to.
Enjoy yourself.
Okay, great. We'll move back then to appointments, reappointments, and resignations. We were scheduled to finish at 8, so we're probably going to go a little bit further than that. I think there was...
One other item for the broadband, Bruce, before you move on.
Please do.
In the packet was included a memorandum of agreement, an expansion of the existing memorandum of agreement with the WKL-CBA, essentially acknowledging that the town of Readfield has had some effect on refocusing that group and changing their focus to include the possibility of regional broadband that is a comprehensive fiber to the home option, and just basically reaffirms the relationship with each town being able to move independently, but just kind of looking at the next phase of what we're doing. And so that was recommended and suggested by the town of Fayette and some of the other towns. So I thought it'd be appropriate for the Readfield board to consider basically re-upping with that organization, which I'll just say up front, I think is a good idea, and it's really found some legs, I think, and some flow that it did not have before, that I found to be very disruptive, and now I think they're in a much better place, and I feel that I can contribute and also benefit from the work they're doing. So
I would make a motion that we sign the agreement to the Western Kennebec Lakes Community Broadband Association addendum to the memorandum of agreement, understanding that there is no further cost involved with this memorandum.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve this addendum to the memorandum through December 31st, 2021. Is there any discussion? I have nothing to add except as long as we can withdraw. There is a little bit of limited cost in the sense that we have our town manager participate, but there's no financial obligations in terms of payments. So that's the difference there. So I'll go ahead and call the roll on that unless there's anybody else. Mr. Price?
Yes.
Ms. Simmons?
Yes.
Ms. Woodson?
Yes.
Mr. Eno?
Yes.
Mr. Burgoyne is also a yes. Now we'll go down to appointments. Thank you, Eric, for reminding me of that.
no problem.
Appointments, reappointments, or resignations. So we had two groups of people for the Comprehensive Plan Committee. The first group was appointees that are being coming from sending committees, and they are from the Age Friendly Committee, Romaine Turin; from the Enterprise Committee, Jessica Gordon; from the Conservation Commission, Greg Durgan; from the Planning Board, Henry Clausen; from the Planning Board, Paula Clark; and from the Select Board, Dennis Price. I'd like to go ahead and move that we approve the sending committee's suggested members.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the slate of individuals. And, you know, I might just simply say in terms of discussion, I expected this to sort of be a pro forma approval, that really we wanted the committees to figure out their own representation. So we're just going ahead and appointing them based on their high recommendation, of course. So with that, any other discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Price?
Looks like
Yes.
yes.
Ms. Sammons?
Yes.
Ms. Woodson?
Yes.
Mr. Eno?
Yes.
And Mr. Burgoyne is also yes. So now we get into the at-large appointments. I actually wrote questions and I was planning to ask them tonight. And the three questions I was going to ask is, what do you think this volunteer opportunity, why do you think this volunteer opportunity is a good match for you in the town? Tell me about how you like to see groups or committees work from the point of view of being a participant. and what questions do you have about the committee? So I guess we don't have them, and it was probably understood that they were kind of interviewed last time, although they really weren't, but we do have their applications in front of us. And we have 3 positions. We have 4 individuals. We also added 2 alternates. So what is the board's pleasure?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Go ahead.
Want to do that and to then discuss?
Sure.
I would make a motion to appoint Sean Keegan, Matt Nazar, and David Chernell to the 3 at-large positions and Gary Kelty to one of the 2 alternates.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to appoint Sean Keegan, Matt Nazar, David Chernell to the committee, and Gary Keelty as an alternate. And we're understanding alternates are fully participating in all the meetings. They want to vote if quorum was met. I mean, if full quorum was met. In other words, everybody was there. But we expect them to be participants. Did anybody have any other ideas on how this would look? Or thoughts? Okay. My only approach to this would have been to make sure that Sean was in for 2 reasons, because he's younger, number 1, and there's a lot of future ahead of us, and number 2, to try to get some geographic diversity as well. Although I appreciate the fact that people from a single neighborhood all had interest in this, so that's fine with me as well. Any discussion further?
I'd just like to thank the 4 people for volunteering to do this. They each come with a great set of qualifications in different areas. And I think that was what was the most impressive to me, that this is going to make a really well-rounded committee. So thank you.
And in closing on discussion, I would ask Eric to continue to post for a second alternate so we can get that position hopefully filled as well, because there's going to be a lot of work, and people may miss meetings, so alternates are really important. So you have a slate before you. Don't know if I need to reread it. I think I just did. So are we ready to vote? Good. Mr. Price?
Yes.
Ms. Sammons?
You're muted,
Chris?
Chris.
Yes.
Ms. Woodson?
Yes.
Mr. Eno?
Yes.
And Mr. Burgoyne is also a yes. Great. We've handled both of those. Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you. Just after saying, as I did in the introduction, we have more concerns about COVID rising in Maine, and so we have concerns about that, and we've made some alterations to operations to account for that. The case numbers in Maine are growing fairly rapidly, and there are a number of areas of concern in Kennebec County. I think we operated very safely through the initial period of COVID, and so we're going to make sure we do that again. Eric, go ahead and speak to this if you would, please. You might want to actually hit the microphone. And my fan is going, isn't it, Catherine?
This is like whack-a-mole or something. I can't keep track of what's on and what's not. Approach we've taken to this latest spike in COVID is to learn from the lessons over the summer and the spring, and do as much as we can to keep as open as possible while maintaining those protections and those processes that worked well with respect to public health and the health of the employees. which are the focus here. And the only focus. This is quite a burden on everybody, and we all recognize that. Burden on staff, burden on the public, but a necessary function in order to keep everybody safe. So we have gone back to a few of those earlier precautions, the town office being open by appointment only, thinning out the office to ensure that we have no more than 4 employees in at a time. The mask piece, we've taken a bit more of a stronger approach at the office. In the past, the front office had been an area where we allowed people to be without masks unless there were more than a couple people in there. But given the latest information and feedback from the CDC, we ought to be wearing masks in those areas all the time because it's the public space and we could encounter somebody closely, going to the copier, going to someone's desk, even going by someone's desk. It might be 8 feet or 7 feet, but it's still close enough and the air does not move as well inside as outside. So we are requiring masks at all times. And essentially I've started wearing my mask as long as my door is open, even sometimes when it's not, all the time in the office because of the proximity and density that we have. And I'm encouraging other staff to do the same. We can't afford to have someone out sick because that one person out sick probably means we're going to have 2 or 3 people out sick, which means we're probably going to have to shut the town office down completely for a couple weeks. And that would be a major disruption to the residents, but an issue for the staff. So we're doing everything we can to be safe while these numbers are elevated. As soon as they are back to probably 50 or less on a daily basis, that's a threshold that I would feel more comfortable with. The state's been a little bit reluctant to put an actual threshold on their recommendations, but they have been really direct in saying that small group gatherings are a new area of concern. And when you have 6 or 8 people in an office at a time, that constitutes a small group gathering. So we're trying to be more careful with that. We have also added more precautions at the transfer station, again, going from what had been a more open approach to now, we're following the state guidelines or trying to, but basically that parking lot, that open area, masks are required under the new directive from the governor. And that's caused a lot of friction. Last week we had a couple of issues, and then over the weekend on Saturday, it seems we can't go a day without 2 or 3 residents losing it and swearing at staff, yelling, throwing a fit, and saying that they have rights. And they do have rights, but so do other residents. And so my one request to residents, anybody watching this, is to please be calm and respectful of the staff that are just doing their jobs, to try to keep everybody safe, including those who might have medical conditions that don't allow them to wear a mask or a moral objection. We can serve those people. We just can't do it in the same way we have traditionally. And we just want people to try to be respectful. I'm at the point now where I'm close to having to ban people from the facility, not because they won't wear a mask, but because they have exploded and been incredibly disruptive and disrespectful. And that's the issue, really the fundamental issue that I see anyway. And I don't know if the board has any thoughts or suggestions for that, but we've tried to work with staff to have a different approach. It's just some people just don't want to be told what to do, and they'll drive right past staff and they'll yell. And anyway, I'm getting off track, but that was something that kind of bothered me over the weekend. Is I had multiple calls from residents saying that behavior was completely inappropriate, and just want people to be civil.
Well, our town employees shouldn't have to be yelled at and screamed at.
I agree.
And I think the important piece to recognize here is, yes, there are civil liberty freedoms in this country, and no one's trying to take those away from anyone, because we are trying to offer alternate services to anyone who either cannot comply for medical reasons or does not want to for their own intellectual reasons. How are we working that out at the transfer station?
Well, we're trying to communicate as best we can that very point. Unfortunately, I think some people just don't want to listen. And so we've had some struggles, and I reached out to the Kennebec County Sheriff's Office for advice. They're not the mask police. They're not going to be the mask police. But the suggestion was to just let them go roll through, which has caused those people that are causing a scene, it puts other residents out quite a lot. And so it's a really hard nut to crack. I don't see a good solution. Trying to manage the queue differently, I don't think will have any effect. People are going to drive through and drop the trash off if they're going to do it. I don't want staff to try to stop someone from whipping into the spot and jumping out and dumping their trash and then flying off. And it's just, I think if we can find a way to deal with the attitude and the lack of civility, but that's hard to do when you're in a compressed queue waiting in line and you've got 15 seconds to talk to somebody. And they've already made up their mind about what they're going to do when they see the sign that says, masks or face coverings are required. So it's a challenging spot. And I'm trying to work with staff to show that we're supporting them as much as we can. And unfortunately, we might just have to let a few people blow through and send them a letter if we can get the license plate number or identify them saying, this isn't okay. Here are some options. In a calmer way, in a quieter time, they might be willing to consider that. But I'm not sure we have much recourse after that, unless we're willing to tell somebody, you can't come back unless you follow the rules, or you can't come back unless you are civil, which is an easier argument for me to make anyway.
Well, and that's what I was getting at, Eric, is what can we offer, or can you think about and work with Karen and Mike about what could we offer as an alternative? In many stores, if they're requiring a mask, then and someone can't or won't wear one, they offer curbside service.
And we've done that. We've told people that we can not curbside service because we don't do that for anybody. But they can hire a contractor. They can wear a face shield. We're not trying to be picky on this stuff. We're just trying to find a balance. And we've been working on that actively to give alternatives and to have people acknowledge that moral objection is something that can and needs to be dealt with on both sides. So.
Thank you. That's, I don't know if anyone has any ideas, or if someone does, they could let you know, but I think if we can offer something to folks, it might help to diffuse.
Yeah, but there's a lot of stress out there, and a lot of angst over the election, over this new mandate, over the fatigue that people have been feeling on this stuff. So it's just a hot topic, and the town office, we're lucky. We lock the doors, and if someone doesn't have an appointment, they can call and we'll let them in. If they're outside, we can do immediate appointments if we have availability, but we have that option and that ability to say, you can come in if you wear a mask, or we can make alternative arrangements, and we have the time to decompress that. But at the transfer station, there's no valve. So
I think the sad reality is you're dealing with a small group of people that aren't going to listen and just don't care. And I think trying to push back, or maybe banning them, or whatever other action you may think might work, is only going to exacerbate the situation. So my advice would be to keep the town employees out of harm's way to the best of their ability, not to be confrontational, to make maybe one respectful request, and then just let these people through. And hopefully by example, over time, with overwhelming public support and compliance, maybe through a public shaming device, for want of a better description, we might be able to reach these folks. But my impression, sadly, is that I don't think we're going to. And I think we're going to be living with this as long as the situation lasts. Shame on them, but there really isn't a heck of a lot we're going to be able to do about it. It's sad, but I think that's the reality of it. And I think the big thrust as far as our job is concerned is to keep municipal employees safe and to make sure they avoid confrontation at all costs.
Yeah.
I tend
to hold up.
Dennis, do you want to speak first? Would you like to speak?
You, Bruce, please.
Okay, go ahead, and then I'll go ahead and say what I need to say.
I agree with Ralph, and I'm also in a position right now where I manage a public building in Monmouth, Maine, and no matter the amount of people, no matter who it is, there are some folks that just cannot, they will not show that same kind of compassion. They won't. It's their choice. And we can't teach people to be more compassionate. We can't do that as a town. That's a personality trait. But having I will say this, putting the employees like Karen and Mike in the position where they have to kind of be their same kind of enforcement, it is difficult. It puts them in a very strange position because what is the end game? You know what I mean? What if they, that sort of thing. And so it is an unfortunate and misguided attempt at making a statement when really people just want to throw their garbage away. So it's the wrong time to do it, and we all recognize that. But there are people who will act out no matter what. So I want Karen and Mike to be safe. I want people who come to our transfer station be safe. And if there are people who don't want to have that happen or buy into that, I can only imagine that it will reflect more on them than and have them move along than having a big to-do. And that's how I feel.
That's good
agree.
advice so far. I really appreciate the direction.
I'm probably maybe the outlier here. I don't have a lot of sympathy for this situation. I think it's incredibly disruptive and dangerous and rude for you to pull in between two cars of people that may be 70 years old and not masked. But by the same token, I absolutely agree with everything that's said here that we really can't put our employees in a difficult position. So I would say if somebody pulls up to the booth and they're insisting on not wearing a mask, then let the yard clear out, let them in alone, make everybody else hold up, and tell everybody else why. That's my own personal take on it. Operationally, for flow and for good service, that may be impractical, or it may be practical for the attendant to say, please use the furthest parking space and only allow one person in, or something like that. And ask that person, I've got an unmasked person ahead of you. Are you comfortable with that? If you take the space a couple down from them, and so on and so forth. I will say, in terms of my interaction in public retail places and so on and so forth, and I haven't gone out a lot, but every single incident of crossing by somebody who's unmasked is almost, it's not intentional. People bump into each other coming around aisles and so on and so forth. So, on the other hand, people who aren't masking may feel they can perfectly act safely in an outdoor environment at the transfer station, but it's just people are crossing in front of one another with barrels and so on and so forth. So I'll get off my high horse, but I do want to express that that's how I feel about it, and maybe operationally we have to act more like an hourglass when we have somebody who's going to come into the facility unmasked and insist that that's how they're going to use the facility. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you all. I appreciate the time we spent on this. It's good to hear those perspectives because it's such a hard issue. and I definitely appreciate what you've all said.
We'll
So,
move on.
yeah, I'll wrap up.
Excuse me?
That's it for COVID.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, we did that. 21045, consider automobile graveyard permit renewal applications. There's just one, is that correct?
Just
Eric?
one, and Judy did do the inspection, and there's no issues. So this was the last outlier from the batch that we had prior.
Right, so I'm going to move that we approve the automobile graveyard junkyard for 2021 for Lucas Parts and Salvage as presented in your packet. It expires on October 30th, 2021, by the way.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve that application that is in your packet for Lucas Auto Parts and Salvage. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mr. Price,
Yes.
Ms. Simmons,
Yes.
Ms. Woodson,
Yes.
Mr. Eno,
Yes,
and Mr. Burgoyne is also a yes. We'll consider next, well, we'll get a project update, and let's go ahead and have an extension of this meeting to
I'll
go.
make a motion to extend the meeting for 15 minutes to 8:15.
Thank you. All in favor? All in favor? I'm not going to call a roll on this. I'll go by consensus of nod.
Yes.
Okay, so good. If it had been an issue, I would have taken the roll. Fire station library building project update. Eric and Ralph, this is kind of yours.
All right.
go ahead, Eric.
And why don't you just why don't you roll this right into the new business of 21051 as we move along on this?
Be my pleasure to do that. It works out well on the agenda. I did include numbers from S.J. Wood that they had promised for budget purposes only, and that's a very key piece here. We now have at least a couple of estimates of what this work would cost to do a retrofit for a sprinkler system or a full installation. I will say I very much believe these numbers are on the high end after speaking with the fire marshal, which is addressed in the second in the next item. But these numbers aren't far off from what we had estimates from our engineer, and these are for a fairly robust fire suppression system. I don't believe that the retrofit with the masonry wall is the right approach for this building or for the town. I think that it would
I agree.
be substantial. What's that, Ralph?
I agree with that.
All right, good. Cost a substantial amount of money and not really do much justice to the building or to the equipment or people that occupy it because it wouldn't provide full protection. The full sprinkler option does cost more and would cost more. However, it offers complete coverage. And this system, after speaking with the fire marshal, could be modified pretty significantly given the fact that this is just a straight worst case scenario cost and doesn't take into effect the many improvements that were actually made to the building under the initial assumption that we would be required to have a less involved or no, I guess I should say no sprinkler system. So we have 5/8 drywall in double stack all over the place. We have special precautions in the hung ceiling is not just the ceiling going to rafters. There's drywall 18 inches above it. So we have a number of things that actually will reduce the need and burden of this system. The fire marshal, I think, was probably on the low end, but he said 40 to 50,000 would be his estimate for what this might cost. But I don't think that was including any retrofit or additional work. I'd say 50 to 70 would be a very rough ballpark of where I think it may land. But then again, we need to work and find a way to proceed with a fire design professional to get this underway. So now that we have a couple of those numbers in place, I think that we can reach out to either the company that S.J. Wood had been working with which would be a good low barrier option, or put out an RFP for services to, I guess, a broad request for services for a design build type approach, where we would have firms come in and tell us what they would recommend and provide some of their base rates. And we could do something of a process by which we would look at the costs that we could expect in round numbers, pick a contractor, and then move ahead and do an actual complete design with that contractor and then have them build it. And a big piece of that to do this successfully is working with the fire marshal's office. And that's why I don't quite want to go with a full RFP, because you know, it would make it so they would be designing this stuff without talking with the fire marshal's office in depth. And I don't want to get into that situation. The fire marshal recommended that we find a vendor, find a contractor, work with them to work with the fire marshal's office to do the design, excuse me, and then wrap up the project and have them build it that way. So that is my, I guess, direction and suggestion for addressing the sprinkler system. And that is very much institutionalized, I guess, in the memorandum under new business, or I guess it's a resolution that I drafted in consultation with the fire marshal and with the fire chief to meet the needs that they set out for us to wrap this project up in about an 12 to 18 month period, and take some immediate action so that we can occupy the building. So I guess I'll stop there and take questions and you know, anything else on that one component. And I guess that's a very myopic focus on the fire suppression system. But that's where we are right now if we're going to proceed with any of the rest of this work, I think.
Comments, questions for Eric? Catherine, please.
I'm fine with everything you said, Eric, and with the memorandum. I have two questions. One, did legal look at this? And second, I'm a little concerned that the last sentence or the second sentence is in part 2, that the review and permitting change for lodging and rooming. I think that should take place at the same time that the sprinkler system is installed. I would hate for us to install this system and then not decide to do the lodging and rooming for another 3 years. And at that point, them say, oh, wait, this won't actually work. I think they need to go hand in hand. If we spend the money, I would like to see that permit be changed at that same time. And I'm a little concerned about 18 months to budget, complete, and pay for. That means we have to have this approved in this coming budget.
Yeah, so this is a resolution, right? So it's somewhat aspirational, yeah, that's my intent, and that's the intent, I think, of the fire marshal. We want to correct this as soon as possible, and the fire chief as well.
The way I see this resolution is it commits the select board to supporting putting this into the budget and recommending it to voters. Obviously, voters have the final say on it, but obviously, anytime we put forward a budget, we are putting it forth in the best belief that that's what fits the town. So when we resolve to do this, I think that's what we're saying, is that we're going to fold it into the budget. I do like the idea of making sure we can do the occupancy from the get-go once the project's completed. You know, if the ambulance service has decided to expand, or if there are grants available to do so, or whatever, it would be nice to be able to accommodate that.
My other concern with the 18 months is if we come in at the 194,000, and our estimates have been pretty, unfortunately, have been pretty darn low compared to what people are willing to do work for. I'm not sure we can pass a budget that would allow us to do that. I don't know if people would commit another almost $200,000 to the building in this next budget cycle. If it was 50,000, I think we have a better chance. So I'm just concerned, that's all.
Yeah, and so, in order to actually budget for this properly, we would need to start that relationship with a builder or installer of these services. I think that we could get a fairly good number within a couple months if we start this process quickly and get these people in talking with the fire marshal's office. They'll have a very good idea of what's going to be acceptable and what's not, and they'll be able to hash it out with the fire marshal's office and come back and give us a number. I think that we would probably not have a construction contract until after we have that number, obviously. But starting the process, selecting a vendor, and maybe putting some money up for the design phase, I think is where we have to go next on this. And to your other point about the timing, the applying for the permit, that would not commit us to making that change. And the fire marshal wouldn't issue us the permit anyway until, at least the occupancy, until after that work was done. So really, those two things can and would happen basically at the same time, the way that's drafted as I understand it. But if you have some suggested language changes that would make that clear, I'm happy to look at that and make that change. But I think it's just a bit of a nuance around when the process of permitting is started. The fire marshal wants to make sure we're starting that process. And then the occupancy would be issued once that change has occurred and the sprinklers installed satisfactorily. So if that makes sense.
So the fire marshal is saying we have to get this done. He gave you a timeline.
They would like to see this cleaned up just as much as we would. They're not going to tell us what to do with the building. If we want to use it as a business and storage use forever, that's fine by them. But given the fact that we had tried to apply for this as a residential use, just like when somebody applies for a residential use for us and starts advertising for business uses and concerts, we get suspicious. So they're suspicious, and they have a right to be suspicious. And it just, in order to clear this up, that's the preferred direction on all sides, at least between the fire marshal, myself, and the fire chief. The select board and the public may have a different approach given the cost or other factors, and I totally recognize that.
Well, I'd like to move that we go ahead and approve this resolution and send it to the board ourselves to sign. Do I have a second on that?
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve the select board resolution pursuant to the Readfield Fire Station Safety, Occupancy, and Use, and that is as written and as discussed here. Is there any further discussion on that motion?
Yes.
Seeing none, I'll call. Yes,
I
please,
said
Catherine.
yes. I would like the second sentence in part 2 to go to part 3. So that it states that after it's completed, we will have the occupancy change. I just don't want it to be open-ended. But I think that's a great idea.
Does that make sense to you, Eric?
It does. I don't think it changes the intent substantively either way, so I'm happy to move it. Yeah.
Okay, so 3 becomes 2 and 2 becomes 3?
Well, I think Catherine was just saying moving that second sentence to the second, I'd say to the end of that item 3. So it would end with fire station and then say at the time that the use of the occupancy will change. Is that right, Catherine? that
Yes.
you're moving that.
I just want the, yeah, I
So,
want the,
Catherine, what I'm going to ask you to do then is go ahead and amend the motion so we get it out.
okay,
and
I'd like to
decide.
amend the motion, putting the second sentence of part 2 as the second sentence of part 3.
That's very clear. Thank you. Do I have a second on that, please?
Second,
It's been moved and seconded to amend the primary motion as discussed here to move under number 2 of the resolution, the second sentence to number 3, to be part of number 3. Correct? Is it read as I mentioned? Okay, we're gonna vote on the amendment first, and then the full scope. With that in mind, is there any discussion on the amendment? Okay, we'll go with Mr. Price,
Yes.
Ms. Sammons,
yes.
Ms. Winston,
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Eno,
Yes.
and Mr. Burgoyne is a yes. Now we'll go to the primary motion, which is approving the resolution as amended. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, we'll go ahead with Mr. Price,
Yes.
Ms. Sammons,
Yes.
Mr. Woodson,
Mrs. Woodson says yes.
Mrs. Woodson, Mr. Eno,
And Mrs. Ego says yes.
Mrs. Burgoyne, I guess I should say, says yes as well. Great. 21-052, which is to accept a $5,000 grant from the Center of Tech and Civic Life. The 1-minute overview of this, Eric, is that this is basically assisting us with paying some of our polling costs. Is that correct?
That's right. It's just a direct response to COVID and the unprecedented election we've had, and a civic organization that's been doing this across the country, and we're grateful, and I hope you guys move forward with it.
I'm going to move that we accept the grant in the amount of $5,000 from the Center of Tech and Civic Life.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept that grant as noted. Any discussion on that? We like grants. Great. I'll call the roll. Mr. Price,
Yes.
Ms. Sammons,
Yeah.
Ms. Woodson,
Yes.
Mr. Eno,
Yes.
Mr. Burgoyne is a yes. Consider hiring a recording secretary for the Comprehensive Plan Committee. My thinking on this has been all along that I want board members or those committee members to have good discussions, and one of them not to be kind of in the role, if you will, of doing all the recording. And I really want them discussing the comprehensive plan. So I think this is the right number. What I would do is just go ahead and authorize the Comprehensive Plan Committee to hire a recording secretary as they see fit for a stipend of up to $100 per month. My source for those funds would be to take it out of select board expenses or committee expenses. I'm not sure what we have available in between those two, but I believe we can handle that. And that would,
Yeah. So we could,
Go ahead,
we
please.
also do have some funds available for planning board support. Staff, and I think that those are typically underutilized. So I would be comfortable using some of those as well, and perhaps as a first choice. So just another option.
I'm not going to tie this to any particular line item. I think everything we've discussed makes sense. Go ahead, Catherine.
Do we want to make that per meeting rather than per month? If a meeting is 2 or 3 hours and then they need to write things up afterwards, that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what makes sense there. I'm looking for friendly advice on this. So, and I don't have a second yet. What's that?
Why don't we simply set an hourly rate so that if meetings run long, then there's compensation. If they run short, good for us. And as far as attributing the cost to a specific department, I know we had a budgeted line item for the planning services. I was wondering if there's a contingency there, because I think that's part of the exercise, and it should go in a line item that's most closely associated with the exercise.
Do you have an idea of the cost, Eric, that's reasonable?
I mean, I would say around 15, but that's, I mean, it's an evening meeting, it's infrequent. It wouldn't exceed the rate that we're currently paying front office staff. That seems reasonable to me. Again, it's, you know, it's a small job, but I'd almost rather not set an hourly rate, just because I think a lot of this comes down to negotiation and trying to find the person who's willing to do the work and do it well. And it might be better to just put a dollar cap on it for the year. Yeah, it's a tricky one. It's a small but important role.
How about this? I'll make a motion to authorize the town manager to hire a recording secretary for the comprehensive plan committee, not to exceed $2,500 for each year.
I guess that's a little bit greater than what I was thinking, but that's fine. I actually don't think it needs to be Eric to make this hire. I think Eric should approve, kind of sign off on it, but I really think if we just let the comprehensive plan seek volunteers, and if somebody from the planning board wants to do this as an extra charge or something that's not on the comprehensive plan, that's fine too.
Don't all hires have to go through the town manager? Because we only hire the town manager, and I don't think committees can hire people.
Yeah. Well, I see this as a stipend. I don't see this as a hire. That's why I used
Well, I still think
round
the town
number.
manager
I don't
has
know,
to
but
give a
Eric, I want to go with what's best practice. So, or go ahead. What is best practice?
I mean, either way is fine. I mean, it's like, for example, the fire chief, you know, I appoint, but the select board has to approve. It can go different directions. I don't mind stepping back from this one and letting them make recommendations or even do some of the interviewing. I try to be inclusive in that anyway, but I mean, basically, I have to sign off on the payroll and all of that and the hiring documents. So yeah, I can certainly give it a nod and allow the committee to take leadership of choosing that person. So I think that's probably an acceptable solution to just to maybe, if I had to suggest a motion, to have the town manager work with the comp plan committee to make the hire. And I will give them as much leeway as I possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually see this as a hire. I just simply see this as a stipend for somebody to record minutes and keep track of them at minutes. I see it as a volunteer who's getting a stipend.
So that even the stipend position is
all
not
based.
employee, unfortunately.
Okay.
Technically,
Okay, but we have to be careful in terms of stipulating it as a hire, because this is part-time, and I really don't want to see the town in a position where it might be on the hook for unemployment compensation somewhere down the road when the job ends.
Yeah, well, so they wouldn't be, just given the nature of the work and the lack of any stability. They wouldn't be in. I mean, we could look at this and say we could contract with them as an independent contractor.
Okay.
Basically, if someone gets money from the town of Readfield as a stipend or an hourly rate, they're an employee of the town. That's just how it is. We handle those groups differently. You know, we definitely do have different approaches to that. But I think, you know, unless we were to work with them as an independent contractor, that would be the only sure way to have that be a separate.
I have two motions to make. The first is to make a motion to extend the meeting for another 15 minutes.
Second.
Everybody who is, does anybody object to extending the meeting for 15 minutes? Good.
Okay, and then a new motion for the secretary. I'll make a motion that the town manager facilitate having the comp plan committee hire a recording secretary to work with them throughout their work.
Can I recommend just a one-word change? Instead of hire, let's
Sure.
just say engage.
Perfect.
Okay? I'll second your motion.
I think we're there. Thank you.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mr. Price,
Yes.
Ms. Sammons,
Yeah.
Ms. Woodsum,
Yes.
Mr. Eno,
Oh, yes.
and Mr. Regoinza, yes. Consider a workshop to discuss Parks and Rec. Let's go ahead and just do that as a part of the polling that we're going to do, the Survey Monkey or whatever it is we're going to do for that. Okay? Everybody fine with that?
Yeah, sounds good.
Let's get on to 21-0. And, you know, I apologize for going over tonight. We did have some longer items, but I just want to say that, you know, we're kind of getting reused to doing it this way. So bear with me. Consider additional LED streetlights in potential locations. So in your packet, we're ready to move forward with the LED streets, and there's been some discussion about adding some locations. Catherine, I believe you were the prime mover of adding locations.
Yes.
I want to minimize as many added locations as possible.
Yep. So
But go
these are
ahead.
just the ones that I came up with that I notice are not
Yep.
well lit. We've had a fatal accident at Pea Ridge and the Lane Road. North Road and Wings Mill Road is a hard one, even in the daytime. People often come skidding to a stop, not realizing that it doesn't go across. Maybe signage would help that as well.
So the bottom line is that when we signed up with this, we signed up that we could have up to, I think the warrant said 4 new streetlights. And I think obviously as we go along, if we needed to buy a streetlight, we need to buy a streetlight. You know, we'll go through the process of doing that. Eric, did you have any priority or review of these done at this point?
I have not. The suggestion was made that we might, ask law enforcement for their perspectives or the DOT. I haven't had a chance to get that feedback. The one that I think has been pushed most by residents, at least recently, is the one at the fairgrounds in 17. That does make sense. We do have a crosswalk there, and it's not well lit. It's kind of a side light from a street light that's further away. So that one I would say probably ought to be a definite. The others, I don't really have much thought on, unfortunately. So I have to apologize for that.
The issue that I'm having here is that Affinity is going to be starting this work kind of any day now and be completing it in December. So if we put this off, it's not going to happen now. And I'm sure the price is cheapest now while they're here. Maybe we could get Lee to look at this, Eric, and then you and Lee pick the 4 or up to 4 that you think are the most appropriate, and they don't have to be from this list. Maybe there's another one where he's seen more activity. And maybe there are only 2 that seem that they're worthwhile, and that's what you go with.
Yeah, I'll do that. And I'll also just to say that with the fact that I'm not sure if we have additional, we would have to negotiate with CMP a little bit, or at least find out what their costs are for the pole rentals and things like that for these additional items. So that might take a little while. So I will work as quickly as I can with Lee to get this list together and submit it to CMP so they can get back to us and to Affinity about what if there's any changes that need to happen to the pole, kind of the make ready kind of thing, like with the broadband.
So the board is expressing, without taking a vote, I don't think it's necessary, that as you look forward into this, that you consider the guidance communication that's already occurred, and that you go ahead and add up to 4 if we can do that. And you're looking you're looking for input from various sources, Lee being a primary one.
And the document that comes after the page of my email says that it's no problem and they would be happy to help Eric do that.
Oh, the Affinity, right?
The Affinity email, yes.
Yes,
From
yep.
John Brannigan.
Yeah, he's unfortunately no longer with the company, but the new guy seems decent as well. So, yeah, we'll get this moving.
So unless I've messed up, I believe I've got a check mark next to each piece of business.
The only thing we skipped, Bruce, was the updated calendar for the budget. I think Eric rescheduled that first public meeting to a date in March that we had asked for.
I did.
So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, and it's important that it's, in the view of the public. So
Great. I thought that was probably just part of your report, Eric, but thank you for pointing that out, Catherine, and it is in the packet. So there are documents to be signed, that resolution, warrant, well, not warrants, but I think there's a couple documents here. So you'll have those prepared. You'll send us an email, and everybody can drop by the office within a day or two and sign what they need to sign.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody.
Let me know when you're coming.
I would take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved to adjourn and seconded. Mr. Price?
Yes.
Ms. Sammons?
Yeah.
Ms. Woodson?
Yes.
Mr. Eno?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.